he's an SBS alumni, and he's currently working at Sovereign Capital Partners. So he's just come along today to do a bit of a presentation and a Q&A about his time at SBS and his career journey so far. So I will hand over to Jonathan now. If you've got questions, I think there'll be some time at the end to ask those as well. So thanks, Jonathan. I will move your slide along for you.
Great, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all, and I hope you are all well in these rather strange times, in all honesty. But per the introduction, I just thought I'd give you a brief overview of my time at Southampton and how my career's evolved since then, really. I have to admit, when writing these slides and I put 2003 in there, it did make me feel rather old. And I realised just how long ago it was. But I did study at Southampton from 2003 to 2006. So I studied a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and Finance. That wasn't really because I knew I wanted to be an accountant, but I always wanted to do something in business, as people say. But I didn't know exactly what that was. But I thought that degree would be a good grounding to learn lots about finance, accounting, business, which it certainly was, and helped prepare me very well for the future, I think. During my second year at Southampton, I was able to secure an internship with Kpmg. So I worked for them in their tax team, actually, and that was in Bristol. So I did that for the summer, which was a great experience. So some of you may well have done similar programs in the past few years. And after that, in my final year, I became what was known then as a brand ambassador for Kpmg on campus. So that meant running some recruitment events for them, trying to get more students to apply to join their various graduate programs, and also doing things like handing out leaflets. And that was quite important because, one, it allowed me to stay in touch with the firm and the people I'd worked with during my internship. And frankly, also they paid me a little bit of money, which helped as well. So after that internship and then working for them for another year on campus, I was able to secure a full-time graduate position with Kpmg, where I joined in 2006. If I could just flick over the page. Has that moved on? As for me. So hopefully you can see that second slide, just a bit about my career journey so far, really. So as I mentioned, I joined Kpmg in 2006 on their graduate program based in London. Off the back of my internship, which was in tax, I initially joined in their corporate tax team in London, focusing on the financial services sector. And that was very interesting, but it wasn't something I wanted to do for my entire career. So I actually, as part of the program, you had to second to another team in the business. And I seconded into what's called transaction services, which is really called financial due diligence. So helping large corporates or private equity funds who are trying to buy a business undertake due diligence on them. So in short, checking the numbers, that they add up to what they should, the accounting policies are correct, etc. So I moved into that team and I really enjoyed that. So I kindly asked the team if I could stay, which they said yes to. So I completed my training in that team, and I qualified as a chartered accountant in 2009, and that was with ICAS, which is the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland. Another name you might be familiar with is ICAEW, which is England and Wales, but there's no difference really once you've qualified. During my time at Kpmg, I worked on quite a wide range of deal types. So I worked on a take private. So I helped a private equity fund buy a business off the stock exchange. That's a business called Kelder Water, and that's a 3 billion transaction. And then I also worked on much smaller deals, all the way down to about £10 million. So a huge range of deal types and sizes, really. But during that time, working for some private equity funds, that's what first piqued my interest in private equity, and I decided that's the direction I would like my career to take. So at that point in time, this would have been 2010, I started looking for recruitment opportunities externally, contacting private equity funds and recruiters trying to make that move. And in all honesty, it was incredibly hard. So this was the middle of the global financial crisis. Firms weren't recruiting, they were firing. And there were a huge number of people like myself qualifying from all the accountancy firms looking for these jobs. So it was really tough. And the feedback I got mostly was you need to go and get more corporate finance, investment banking experience before you can make the move into private equity. So that's what I sought out to do. But obviously that didn't change the recruitment market. I tried to move internally in Kpmg. They were firing, not hiring. So I had to go elsewhere. And cut a long story short, I ended up with a few opportunities. I had an offer to join an investment bank called Nomura, also Deutsche Bank, and then also a boutique called Gleacher Shacklock, which isn't on here actually, but I'll come on to that. And I chose to go and join the boutique because I wanted a different experience to the bulge bracket investment banking schemes that some of you may be familiar with and may be going on to do. And that was just a decision I'd made. I decided that bulge bracket route wasn't for me. So I joined this boutique investment bank called Gleacher Shacklock. And in all honesty, I didn't really enjoy it that much. I had 10 or 12 interviews to get the job. And in hindsight, I probably didn't think enough about the culture of the firm I wanted to work for, whether I get on with the people, etc. So 4 months in or so, I was thinking, I'm really not enjoying this. And I don't hugely get on with the people. What have I done? Have I made the wrong decision? And then I got a call from a recruiter about a job at a company called Experian. And I'll be honest with you, when I got that call, it sounded like just about the most boring job I'd ever received a call about. But the recruiter encouraged me to be open-minded and go and meet the chap who run this team. And it was an internal team called Corporate Development, which in a large corporate is a team that helps the business acquire other businesses around the world, create joint ventures and sell some of its underperforming businesses, for instance. So it was still along the lines of mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling businesses. It was just a route I never thought my career would take. Anyway, I went to meet the chap who ran this team, and after that first meeting, I was completely sold on this opportunity. And fortunately enough, I was able to secure that role. I left my job at Gleacher Shacklock and I joined Experian. So for those who don't know Experian, it's a FTSE 100 company. It provides information, data and analytics. That's what it does for its clients globally. And it's quite a big business. Its market cap on FTSE 100 is north of 20 billion. So I joined as an analyst in that team. I was one of 5 or 6 people there, helping Experian acquire and sell companies in the UK, in Europe. I did a couple of deals in the US and traveled all around the world, actually. And during my time there, I bought over 10 businesses for Experian, and I was fortunate enough to be able to progress from the entry-level position to second in charge of the team within 4 years. And as I mentioned, I worked in the UK, throughout the world. Deal sizes ranging from $1 billion all the way down to, again, 10 million. So a huge range of experience there. And having worked for Experian for roughly 5 years, by that point, I built up quite a lot of experience in how to buy companies. So in my mind, I was comfortable that I'd got the experience I needed to get into private equity, but by a very different route to the typical investment banking route. So after 5 years, I'd done a number of deals. Some corporates, including Experian, tend to go in 4 or 5 year phases. So we did 5 years of aggressive acquisitions. And the option for me then was, do I sell some of the other underperforming businesses in Experian's portfolio, which didn't appeal to me? Or do I go and find something else to do? So I started to explore private equity again, and I found at that point in my career, I was able to get a lot more traction, get lots of interviews and a few offers. Cut a long story short, that led me to join a UK private equity fund called Sovereign Capital. I joined in 2014 and I'm still with that business today, and I'm a director there. Sovereign manages about £1 billion of funds on behalf of our investors. So our investors include pension funds, insurance businesses, some very private wealthy individuals, some corporates, and they give us money to invest on their behalf. The idea being over a 5 to 10 year period, we give them back a lot more money than they gave us originally. Typically 3 times what they gave us is what we target. The nature of my career to date has meant I focus on 2 sectors, technology and also business services. So I exclusively spend my time at Sovereign looking for new investment opportunities there. And I currently sit on the board for 3 of our portfolio businesses at Sovereign, so I represent our interests on the board of that business. So that's where I am today. And if we just can flick over the page, I've got a bit more detail on what this role involves day to day. Thank you. So firstly, as a private equity fund, our job is to raise capital from third-party investors and then look for businesses to invest that money in. And that's what we refer to sourcing. So I spend a lot of my time looking for new investment opportunities, trying to contact businesses, meet businesses, see if the owners of those businesses might be seeking private equity investment, networking with investment bankers who might have businesses that they want to sell, and they'll be speaking to a variety of private equity funds to try and do that. That actually sounds quite simple. It's probably the hardest part of the job. It's an incredibly competitive market. There is billions of pounds worth of capital out there. So we spend an enormous amount of our time networking with the types of people I just mentioned, trying to unlock those investment opportunities for us. The second key part of my job is what we call deal execution. So once you've found a business and a management team that you want to invest in, clearly you need to agree the terms of that transaction, which actually can be incredibly complicated. So part of my job is to agree those deal terms, structure the deal, and then run that deal all the way through to completion. So that can involve a variety of different things. It can mean managing all of the due diligence, which can include financial, tax, commercial, a review of the IT in the business, the legals, etc. It can be negotiating the documentation that affects the transaction. So when everyone signs on the dotted line, that transaction closes and completes. And it can be negotiating with the management team about what their terms are going to look like post-deal when they're working with us as their investment partner. And finally, once you've concluded a deal, there's a role we refer to as portfolio work. So when we've deployed capital into a business, a representative from our fund will then join the board of that business along with the senior executives. And it's our job to represent our fund's interests on the board, debate strategy, understand the numbers, maybe help them make some more acquisitions, etc. And the final part of the job, which isn't mentioned on here, is eventually selling those businesses, hopefully for significantly more than we paid for them. Ideally, it doesn't always go like that, unfortunately. So at a high level, that's what I do today. And then for what it's worth, I just thought it worth jotting down a few bits of advice. And I'm by no means saying these are correct, but as I've gone through my career, these are principles that I've tried to follow, or as I've gone along the way, I felt are quite important. The first one being, if you don't know the exact direction you want your career to go in, I wouldn't worry about it. When I joined Kpmg, I never had a burning ambition to be an accountant for the rest of my life. But I thought it was a fantastic grounding, and if I enjoyed it, I would have very happily stayed there for many, many years. I just happened to get to the point in my career where I wanted to go and try and do something different. And I can also tell you now, 15 years or so into my career, there's nothing stopping you going back, which is something I'll come on to in a minute. Oh, I've lost the slides there.
I can just reshare those. Not sure where they went.
I've got them here actually, if you want me to share them.
It's just currently sharing now.
Cool, thank you. So in short, don't worry about it. I personally don't think you need a career map that's entirely planned out, because the chances are it won't go exactly as you envisage. Secondly, unfortunately, there are no shortcuts for hard work in my experience. And I've always sought to get my head down, work hard, learn as much as I can, always ask questions. And so far, I think that served me well. Thirdly, build your network and stay in touch with everyone that you can. And at the start, that's quite hard to do because you don't necessarily see the value of it. But as you go on in your career, you'll have some people you train with or you work with on a graduate program, and eventually over the years they'll go off to do a wide range of things, and you never quite know where anyone will end up. So I've always sought to stay in touch with everyone I've worked with, and it can just be a coffee once a year, or if you know them well, once a quarter, or a lunch or a dinner, whatever it might be. But I'm 99% sure at some point in your career you'll have a problem to solve, and you'll think, well, the person who might know the answer I met at uni 10 years ago. And if you keep in contact with them and they're in your network, it's hugely valuable to be able to tap into people like that and get their support. And I'm sure they will do the same with you as well. Fourthly, be open-minded. And you can see from my career, if you speak to other people who've worked in accounting or private equity or investment banking, some of them have quite vanilla routes. And mine took a slightly different direction with a corporate development role at Experian, and it was never something I envisaged. But in hindsight, it was absolutely the right move for me to make, to quit the job I wasn't necessarily enjoying and go and try something different. So be open-minded. And finally, be nice. You would be amazed, in finance in particular, how many people create a persona of the way they should behave, and there's a habit of people being quite unpleasant to each other. But I think there is absolutely no reason to be nice to people, and in particular in my job now, where we're trying to build relationships with people who want to sell their businesses to you. We typically invest in a business for 5 or more years, and it is no fun if you don't get on with the people on the board of that business. So it always helps to be kind and to be nice to people as well. So that's it really. That's just about. Hopefully that advice is useful. It's helped me along the way, and I'm very happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Jonathan. I can see we've got quite a few questions. So I wonder if anyone's got any questions for Jonathan.
Hi, it's Julia. I've got some questions.
Sure.
Hang on. I've written down a couple of questions, but you did touch on some of them already, but maybe you can just expand on them. So was there any skill that you wish you had studied or you'd learned at the beginning of your career that would have helped you, in the long run?
That is a very good question. The reality is, each stage in your career or my career, every time you think you know a lot, you move job or you take a job and you realize actually there's a hell of a lot I don't know. So I think you build those skills along the way, and you're constantly learning. You never start a job or a career entirely comfortable, that you have all the skills and training that equip you for it. And that's why companies invest a huge amount of money into training, right? For that very reason, to help you along the way. If I think of when I started my career, my time at Southampton, and actually the degree I'd chosen equipped me very well, because I went on to train as an accountant initially, and obviously my studies equipped me quite well for that, because I had a very good base understanding. But what I can tell you is it only gets more complicated, unfortunately. The one thing I think I've learned along the way is the interpersonal skills. And you can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's breaking up a little bit. I think it's working fine.
Okay. I was just saying, the one thing you can't necessarily learn quickly is the interpersonal skills, and that's hugely important. And I would encourage you, while learning, depending on what you choose to go and do in your career, technical parts of your job, it's that point about networking, learning to read people, understand what worries them in a situation and what they want to achieve. Because at the end of the day, the chances are, whatever career you choose, you'll be working with people. And people are the most unpredictable part of any situation, unfortunately. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yeah. I've got a couple more, but I don't know if anyone else wants to ask them. No. Okay, I'll go ahead. Do you have any? Well, you gave us some advice, but do you have any tips for working for a large, ambitious corporation? Like any resilient skills? Like I personally worked in a large corporation before, and there were times, where you're struggling with the environment.
Yeah, I think the more people you can speak to, network with, is only a good thing. I mean, in terms of the resilience point, I think it depends on your nature. I've always just wanted to work hard because I've wanted to achieve something or get to the next stage. I think sometimes things do get incredibly stressful, and in the career path I've chosen, sometimes the hours can be quite long. So it's really important that you have something to disconnect yourself from work every now and again. And I've been working for something like 15 years now. That's got harder and harder because, believe it or not, when I joined Kpmg, I didn't even have an iPhones. I don't think existed, or just about were to exist. So you couldn't access your emails easily. BlackBerry was the thing then, but they were so expensive they didn't give them out. Now I think if you go on to join a corporate like that, you'll be on your emails all the time, and sometimes that can get to you. And if you work for an international business, depending on your role, people can call you at any time of the day. So I think it's becoming increasingly important to try and switch off and have something outside of work to take your mind off things. And just, to give you an example on my job again, when we're trying to convince people to do a deal with us, you take them out for dinner and you get to know them over many hours, probably a few glasses of wine. And the interesting stuff about people is the stuff they do outside of work. No one wants to know what I've got on my desk, or the boring stuff about your job. So it's important to build a range of interests outside of work, I think.
Yeah. Again, I've got one, but you did touch on that as well already. When would you say it's time to move on from a job or a company?
Another good question. So, if you look at the moves I've made, none of them were planned when I started that job. So, when I joined Kpmg, I probably thought, I could do this forever if I really like it. And I think you'll come to a natural evolution, and it could be personal life, it could be professional life. Perhaps you've reached a ceiling and you want a new role that's not currently available to you. If I think of my changes, and this could apply to some of you at the moment, I was trying to leave Kpmg in the middle of the global financial crisis, which was tough, stressful, but based on what I wanted to achieve, I decided it was the right thing for me because I couldn't progress internally anymore. So the decision to move was almost made for me. The hardest decision I've ever made to leave was when I joined that boutique investment bank. At the time, it was my dream job. I had 12 interviews to get it, and I didn't like it. And I thought, what have I done wrong? Have I let myself down? Am I not up to it? But in hindsight, making that decision was one of the best things I've ever done. I could have worked there for 5 years and been miserable. And in fact, I took the decision, probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life. And I ended up having a job that I absolutely loved. And I traveled the world, I did lots of deals, met some great people who I still am in contact with. I don't think there's ever one thing. You need to weigh up the pros and cons and think about what you want to achieve. But if you're unhappy in any job, I would move sooner rather than later. It will figure itself out.
Great, thank you. That's all for me. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Has anyone else got any questions for Jonathan that they'd like to raise, or any comments for discussion? If you'd rather type something in the chat box, you can feel free to do that, and I can read out the question if you like.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hello. Hey, my name is Vinay. I am currently doing my master's in international financial markets, and my question is that I really want to get into global trading and investment banking, but as I have been looking out for jobs since a couple of months now, I see that most of the big companies and other firms, the boutique firms, look for people who have experience of at least 2 to 3 years to get into these fields. What advice could you give on building a successful, getting into one of these roles in the beginning itself?
Yeah, so markets is never an area I've worked on. I've worked on the investment banking or M&A side. But I think the principles are consistent across the different functions. If you're looking for an associate role, so typical, which is what I would describe as an entry-level position for someone maybe who's done a master's or some work experience elsewhere, you're right. They probably do look for a couple of years' experience. Yep. There are other programs you can get onto, analyst programs in the big investment banks, for instance, which will take people straight out of university. In my experience, for instance, when I joined private equity, I had to take a few steps backwards to get into the industry I wanted to get in. I took a pay cut. Yeah. I took technically I took a demotion. And I had to start again. So I'd say if that's the role you really want to take and go for, don't be afraid of maybe going for a position that was lower than you originally envisaged, or with a less well-known firm, for instance, because it's all about getting your foot in the door.
Okay, yeah.
And also reach out to people directly to the extent you can find them on LinkedIn. You'd be amazed how many people reply. And when I got an offer at Nomura many years ago, that's because I emailed one of the managing directors directly, and he said, "I'll pop in for a coffee." That wasn't through a recruiter. So do be proactive. Explain to people why you want to do it, how you tried to build experience along the way, ready to go into that career. Does that help?
Okay. Yep. That's great. Thank you so much.
Hi, Jonathan. It's Julie. I'm involved in the career side at the business school.
Hi.
Hi. That was really helpful. I particularly like the slide that's on the screen here with your key comments, particularly around networking. I think particularly at the moment, it's absolutely the way for our students and alumni to go when they're looking for new roles. I just wanted to ask, obviously you did your accountancy qualification, and in the context of the business school, lots of students are doing postgraduate programs in different areas or MBAs. What's your sort of view on that sort of taking your qualifications further and getting broader experience in that way that maybe would relate to some of our students?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience out in the job market, I tend to find that in the UK and Europe, the MBA is less prevalent, but the MBAs are a must-have if you want a top job in a US company, in my experience. So that seems to be very much a US trend. So I think if you have ambitions to work long-term in America, an MBA is certainly something you should consider. And I think to do that, you need to do 3 or 4 years of work before that. And you might find that by the time you've done that experience, actually, if you want to come back to the UK or Europe or Asia, perhaps you don't need to go down the MBA route. But in the US, it is pretty important. Similarly, a lot of people I come across in my career have gone down the chartered accountancy route in one way or another. So that could be in audit, in transaction services, or they've been a management accountant in a large corporate. And with that qualification, you can go on to do lots of other things. So for me, it was always on my career agenda to go and get some form of qualification like that, because I felt it set a base level of professional experience. It's a well-respected qualification if you do happen to go down the chartered accountancy route. And it also is an entry point for many jobs. The job might not be one of an accountant, but it might say should be an ACA or a CA, for instance. So I'm a big advocate of going on to do further qualifications or training, actually.
Okay, that's great. That's really helpful for everybody. And just another comment, obviously, in terms of what you're doing, it's quite entrepreneurial and reaching out and sort of engaging with businesses. Have you ever thought about setting up your own organisation or going out there and, creating a new entrepreneurial organisation or role? Or do you think that's a different sort of person?
I certainly have. In the industry I'm in now, there are various long-term incentive mechanisms that try to prevent you from doing that, in all honesty. But it's certainly something I've talked about with other people I know in the sector before. So never say never. I probably won't be doing it right now, given what's going on in the world, because I value my job security right now. And as I said, the more senior you get, long-term incentives become quite difficult to break. But I'd love to one day.
That's great. So you don't really see what you're doing as a kind of being a different kind of like corporate person, as opposed to somebody who's entrepreneurial. They're quite blended.
I think that's a very good description, actually. Private equity, certainly in the mid-market where I work, is a nice mix of being entrepreneurial, having to unlock situations, create deals, but also working for a business. It's a nice mix.
Great. And what is your work-life balance like at the moment in the role that you're in? Because you said that was very important.
Good question. It fluctuates enormously. So if you have a deal on, in all honesty, it can be pretty hard work. And to get a deal across the line is quite an intense process. So you're probably looking at 12, 15-hour days plus, sometimes into the weekend as well. And then when you're looking for deals, it calms down a bit. So I can often have a normal working day of 8:30 till 6:30 or 7, and not go way into the night. So in a transactional job like this, and actually any job I've done, unfortunately, which is project-based or transactional, the hours do spike. You have some downtime and you have periods of very long hours. So if you want to avoid long hours, don't do a transactional job.
I think that's really sound advice. My last question, this is probably more personal than anything else. Do you therefore have some exciting hobbies? So when you're networking with all these great organisations and they're looking for the rounded person, the connection, you a windsurfer or something like that?
Well, I wish I was actually a lot more interesting than I actually am. But no, I'm a musician, so I play the guitar a lot. I love skiing. I love scuba diving. I've got 2 young children, 2 girls, which is often a talking topic. Love racing, Formula 1. things like that. Those are my talking points over a beer or around the dinner table.
That's
just
quite-
enough,
that's
just
quite a lot.
enough to be interesting.
That's a lot of talking points. That's quite a lot of things to fit in with. Quite a kind of full-on role as well. So yeah, I think sometimes when I talk to students, they're quite bogged down on the kind of academic career route, and I think you obviously touched on it earlier. It's really important to have other interests, and I think some of those things you learn in one environment, even if it's a hobby, transfer across in terms of say,
and you'll always come across someone with an overlapping interest.
yeah.
And you won't spend your time talking about something technical. You'll spend your time talking about writing music or where you went skiing last year, whatever it might be. I can guarantee you that's what you'll end up doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the more senior you get in an organization, the technical becomes less important, and it's more about relationship management and getting on with people and managing a team of, say, graduates or people earlier on in their career who are still learning the technical elements.
Great, that's fantastic. I'll come off screen now because there may be other careers. I don't really want to monopolise you, so thank you for your comments.
That's all right.
Hi, Jonathan. This is Raymond. I'm the online engagement lead within the Southampton Business School. And a great talk, by the way. So my question is, as an alumnus within the Southampton Business School, what sorts of opportunities are you interested in, really, to engage with the business school and perhaps the other students?
Yeah, you know, this is the first session like this I've done actually, but it's been really interesting. And you know, coming back to the networking point, really, I'm very happy to answer questions offline or give advice to students. As I said, you never quite know where people will end up. You know, I'm grateful to what I learned at Southampton and the grounding it gave me to kick off my career. So, you know, very happy to help in any way I can, really.
Okay, yeah, just something, some news for you. We are possibly we're using a platform called e-mentoring, which will be launched over the summer. So I think that will be something for you to consider.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
For other students and perhaps for other alumni as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Any more?
I think it looks like you've answered most of the questions people had. Did anybody have any last minute questions for Jonathan that they either want to share or type a comment or question in the conversation chat box? Perfect. Doesn't look like anyone's got any more comments.
I think this will be really useful because lots of students aspire to be in the sector that you're in, Jonathan, and I think the competitiveness of the sector and the challenges of the sector are really useful, and we can use this in other ways when people come to us kind of as a reality check of what's expected in this sort of organisation. So I think it'll be really useful for students to listen to online or just remotely, just
Sure.
to get some hints and tips. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And enjoy your last day, everyone.
Well, they've still got dissertations to write.
Oh, dear, sorry. Sorry. Okay.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much for giving us sort of an hour of your time, Jonathan. That's, as Julie said, really useful, and I'm glad that you allowed us to record it as well, because I'm sure there'll be people in alternative time zones that will enjoy watching this. in their own time as well. But yeah, we will let you get back to your day, and I hope everyone has a good weekend when it gets here. But thank you for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Nice to meet you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.